السلام عليكم ورحمة الله نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبه إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأهوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك على الدرجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير. صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Last week we were talking about the path to victory, and I'll kind of continue with that today, inshallah, and tie it up with some other aspects of things as well that we've talked about before. And when we look at things again historically, and the reason to look at history is that human nature doesn't change, and what people do does not change. The way people react to things doesn't change. The propaganda against Islam has never changed. You look at, what Quraysh were doing. You look at what the hypocrites in Medina Munawwara and the Jews were doing, and you look at what, the Romans and the Persians and everybody else at that time were doing. The propaganda that they were using against Islam was the same that they use today. No different. And so when we look at history, we know what the opposition will do, but we also, when we look at the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the life of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those who were the pious predecessors, then we're also taught what we should do. And that's why when we see these things today, because we have lost touch, it feels to us like, oh, this is something new. And it's not. It's the same old thing. The problem is we don't know how to react. So last week when we spoke about victory itself, everything is from Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His way. He has His sunnah. This is so... And His sunnah is set so that we're not guessing what to be doing. Sometimes you have someone, like if you're working somewhere, you have a boss, and the boss has mental issues, and one day he's Jekyll and the next day he's Hyde. You don't know what to do. Every day you got to react somewhere different. Islam is easy. Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have already told us what to do. And not only told us what to do, but also have told us what to expect. Again, when we look at the Quran, the psychology of everybody is in there. And the psychology has not changed. the nafs, the desires, the self, has not changed. And there are a lot of people these days, they tell us all the problems, but don't give us any solutions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran has not only told us the problems, He's also told us the solutions. Last week when we spoke about the path to victory, we look at, we mentioned the Battle of Badr. Clear-cut victory in every sense of the word. But why? What was different? What was the difference between Badr and Uhud? And then what was the difference in Khaybar, in Fatih Makkah, in Hunayn, and the various other battles that took place? Because in Badr and Uhud, you have the same people there. The 313 that fought in Badr, minus the 14 that were martyred, so 300 plus another 400. And yet the outcome is very different. And so we spoke about this when we mentioned that, in Uhud, the difference was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave them a direct order. And he didn't give the order to all of them. This is an important thing to also note. He didn't tell all of them to be sitting up on that hill. There were only 50 of them. Of the 700 soldiers, only 50 of them were given this order: that do not move from your place until you are ordered to do so, no matter what. And so roughly about 40 of them, when they saw that the Muslims were winning and Quraysh were running, said, the battle's over, so now we can move. And the other 10 said, no, we have to stay until we are told to move. But then the others reasoned that no, the order was only for the battle. The battle's over now, so we can move. And suddenly what was appearing to be a clear-cut victory became such a difficulty, to the extent that 70 of the companions are martyred. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is injured. All of these things happened. Why? Because they did not honor the command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, not all of them. Only 50 of them were given this specific command, and not even all of them didn't honor it. 10 of them continued to honor it. 40 of them left. This gets back to that notion that this ummah is one body. So what is going on in one place affects the rest of the body. And we should, when we think of this, we should think of our own body to have some type of understanding of this statement. If my small toe, you look at the body, the small toe, what? It appears insignificant. But if I bump it into something, the whole body knows. The only way the rest of the body wouldn't know is that if the body is dead. Or unconscious. You know, like when you put somebody to sleep to do surgery, you know, they don't realize they're getting cut on. And this is the condition of the ummah now. Again, in Surah Baqarah, verse 248, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Tabut-e-Sakina, the Ark of the Covenant. And he says in that verse about this ark, that he says that within it are the remnants of the family of Musa and the family of Harun. And because of that ark, because of that box, that's all it is. It's a box with what? With some of the things left behind by the family of Musa and the family of Harun. Alayhi salam. And so that whenever Bani Israel would go to battle, they would place this in front of them and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help, and they would be given victory. Why? Because they honored the contents of the box, which are the remnants of the family of Musa and the family of Harun. When we look at any ibadah in Islam, and Hajj is a prime example of this, easy example to understand. Every ibadah, every form of worship that we do, if you look at the roots of it, is simply emulating or copying someone Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Simple example, running between Safa and Marwa. Who ran between Safa and Marwa? Bibi Hajara, the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the mother of Ismail alayhi salam. Why did she run? She ran because her child was thirsty and hungry. And if you look at Safa and Marwa, they're not like huge mountains. They're like small hills. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what about them? He says that they are His signs. Sha'irullah. He's created so many larger mountains, and yet He chooses these to specify as His signs. Why? Because she ran between them. And again, why did she run? Because, you know, many mothers sacrifice many things for their children. And yet we're not commanded to copy them. And yet here she's running because her child is hungry. And we run exactly as she ran. You know, there's part of that when you know, because then she would go up on Safa and look around and see if anybody was coming. And then she would come down and then she would start walking toward Marwa. And then there was a dip in between where she could not see, and as she's walking, she's looking at her son. And then in that dip, she couldn't see him anymore, so she would run. And then she would come up on the other side and then slow down again, and she'd keep looking at her son until she climbed Marwa. And then the same thing over and over. And today, for anyone who goes for Hajj or for Umrah, same thing. They got those two lights that mark the area that between those two lights you run. Otherwise you walk. Even Ibrahim a.s. had to copy his wife when he made the Hajj. Everybody copies her. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is His worship. Why? Because we're copying her. Why was she running? For her child. Who is her child? Her child is Ismail a.s. What is so significant about him over other people? He carries the nur of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is the forefather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So by honoring her, we worship Allah. And, we could go over examples and examples of this. But getting back to the aspect of victory, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends His victory. This is His sunnah, His way. That He gives victory to those who honor the ones that He loves. Those who have some knowledge of Islamic history, everybody knows about Khalid bin Walid, radiallahu anhu. Never lost a battle. But if you look at the way he honored Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is why he never lost a battle. And of course, I need to re-specify this, as we mentioned before. Victory has many meanings. And for the believer, for the true believer, everything is victory. And amongst the greatest victories is martyrdom. Khalid, of course, is Sayfullah. He is the sword of Allah. So he can't be shaheed because the sword of Allah cannot be broken. But in the Battle of Yarmouk, which took place over 6 days, which was the decisive battle against the Romans, the Eastern Romans, the Byzantine Empire. On the 4th day of the battle, which was going to be whoever won that day is going to win the battle. It was understood. And on that day, what happens? In the middle of the battle, he has his men stop. He had his men stop. The Romans are attacking. He says, wait. He says, need to find my cap, my helmet. And they tell him, look, we'll get you 100 helmets. He says, no, you don't understand. So he had his men look for his helmet, which had been knocked off in the battle. And then they find it, and he puts it back on, and then he says, now we fight. What was so significant about his helmet? Within it was the hair of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there are people who try to brush this off, and they say, this is in the books of history. We accept the books of history if they don't contradict the Quran, if they don't contradict the Hadith. And we accept the books of history not just if they don't contradict. Sometimes you can have something that doesn't contradict, but maybe it's not okay. When they affirm what we know from the Quran and what we know from the Hadith. And you look at the Hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. Hujjatul Wida. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has his hair shaved. First, the right side is shaved. He calls Abu Talha al-Ansari, radiallahu anhu, and he hands it to him. And then the left side is shaved, and he hands it to him. And then he tells him to distribute this amongst the people. Why is he doing that if there's no significance in this? And even before this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already tells us, as we mentioned, وَبَقِيَةٌ مِمَّا تَرَكَ آلُ مُوسَى وَآلُ هَارُونَ. Tabut al-Sakina, what is in it? Again, that is what's in it. The remnants of the progeny of Musa and the progeny of Harun alayhi salam. And when they honored it, Allah gave them victory. Khalid is honoring what he received from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because on that day he is holding it, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, what will you do with this? And he says, I will use it to gain strength to fight the enemies of Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But this is all the past. If we look at the future, because Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam already told us what is going on today, he has already told us, and he already told us what is coming. If you look at the hadith where he talks about Imam Mahdi, what will happen? He will be accused of terrorism. And he will go to Medina Munawwara. And then an army will be sent against him. Million-man army. Go through this very quickly. And then he'll go from there to Mecca. In Mecca, the people will recognize who he is. Because until now, no one recognizes him. Now they will recognize who he is, and they will insist on giving bay'ah to him, giving allegiance to him. He will refuse initially, but then when they insist, then he will take their allegiance from them. And then he will take the army and go and fight this army that's come against him. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us that a third of his army, of the army of Imam Mahdi, will run away, and Allah will never forgive them. And a third of them will become martyrs, who will be amongst the best of martyrs. And a third of them will be victorious. How will they be victorious? The earth will swallow the enemy. And this remaining third of his army, that is the victorious part of the army, what will they do now? If you look at the hadith, Rasulullah says that they will go and they will conquer Constantinople. Which also tells us that Constantinople will fall back into non-Muslim hands. And how will he conquer it? By saying takbir. He'll say takbir and one of the walls will fall, and he'll say takbir again and another wall will fall. Then he'll enter the city, which tells us that the people there will be ready to accept him. Why Constantinople? Why not stop anywhere in between? What is significant about Constantinople? Modern day Istanbul. What is kept there? What did the Ottomans acquire and put into museums? Other than what is the remnants of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You have some things that may be not correct, or maybe forgeries, but then you have many things that are the originals, such as the blessed shoes of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, various hair of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, some of his shirts and other belongings, as well as various swords of various companions of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the hadith goes on. There are other aspects of it, but I'm not going to go into that today. Time's running out. The emphasis of what I'm saying is that the only way back to victory, the only way for Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us victory, is that if we honor the ones that He loves. He orders this in the Quran about His Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَتُعَزِّرُوهُ وَتُوَقِّرُوهُ. Honor Him and respect Him. وَعَزِّرُوهُ وَنَصَرُوهُ. Honor Him and help Him. And this has to be done as the Ummah. You know, this is one of the things that, you know, the British worked so hard to remove us from. If you look at the emphasis of the British when they colonized the Muslim lands, it was to separate us from our love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that we start thinking of him like anybody else. You know, he was just a messenger, like a postman who brought a message. That was it. Astaghfirullah. He himself is the message. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the other aspect of this is, as I said earlier, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves someone, He gives him the gift of martyrdom. You know, Umar radiallahu anhu, he used to make dua that, "Oh Allah, give me martyrdom and give it to me in Medina Munawwara." And we see how he gave it, because everybody else would say, "How can you attain martyrdom in Medina? There are no battles here." And we see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to him. You know, and again, that list also goes on as we see. And we see this today. You know, and you can look these up, and they're easy to find. You know, where you have, you know, Gaza, while the bombs are still falling, you have people sitting, literally making mawlud of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reciting salawat on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because their hearts are content. This is victory for them. This is true victory. The test is not for them. The test is for the rest of us. We have left our path. We have no concept of honoring the ones that Allah loves. And if someone starts to honor them, then we say, "Oh, this is shirk. Everything is shirk." You know, except when they kiss the feet of their kings, who are the slaves of the enemies of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's interesting, you know, if you listen to what the enemies were singing when all of this started. What was their song? Part of their songs were attacking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were saying that, "Oh, he's dead and he can't do anything for you." You know, those are non-Muslims saying that. Those are the enemies of Allah and His Messenger. The open enemies, let me put it this way. The open enemies of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying this. The problem is that there are those who claim to be Muslim who have the same statements, the same mindset. And then the rest of us say, "No, you know, this is so-and-so's opinion or that's opinion," just because they claim to be Muslim. I'll end here, because if I start saying anything else, there won't be any time. I didn't get anywhere near where I wanted to, but you know, there's so many aspects to all of this. So I guess we'll continue next week, inshallah. You know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may He protect our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine and throughout the Muslim world. And may He give guidance to the oppressors. But if guidance is not for them, because guidance is not for everybody. You know, we forget this. You know, we think that, oh, you know, we're Muslims, so we're guided. Allah's not going to take that away anytime. Guidance is not for everybody. And if guidance is not for them, then may Allah destroy them. Those who have not made sunnah, go ahead and make sunnah.